Hey y'all, this is Aiden again. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Aiden and I'm an entrepreneur, currently living in the Bahamas. So this is just a page about my experience with entrepreneurship and the hope that I can hopefully help some of you guys with what you're going through. And yeah, let's just create a community of positive, like-minded individuals that's just here to help and support each other on our business journeys. So today I'm going to be talking about Kickstarter and why it was the worst and best idea that I ever had. So I launched my Kickstarter in about 2016, and the purpose of it was to fund my new shoe line or my new shoe brand, House of Assembly, which was going to use, we were gonna, we did create products and we still have them. Long story, and we still have, and so we sold espadrilles made with Bahamian fabrics. So that was the whole that was the summary of it. The Kickstarter was to launch a brand that focused on espadrilles making Bahamian fabrics. And yeah, so I launched that successfully, but everything that could have went wrong after the fact. So I'll get into that. So first of all, what is Kickstarter? Kickstarter is a crowdfunding platform, probably one of the most well-known, if not the most well-known in the world, where you can go and launch your idea. Crowdfunding is an alternative source to other types of investments, such as self-funding or going through like angel investing, or like just sort of like the out or going for a loan. Crowdfunding is seen to be not necessarily like an easier way, but in some ways an easier way, but it's an alternative to like getting a loan. Or if you're not able or qualified to get angel investing or that type of capital, it can be a more approachable way to go about that as well. So yeah, that's why it made it super appealing for me. At the time, I can't remember, I think my goal was maybe $7,000. So yeah, I did all of the things, and this is just like a quick checklist to make sure, like things to make sure that you guys have. Like for example, I'm just reading off my list here. Like you should always advertise and like start to build out your page before the campaign. Figure out what your rewards are gonna be. Plan your visuals to say these are the images that are going to showcase my rewards. These are the images that I'm going to use to advertise the campaign. This is gonna be my press release. And then also you're gonna need to have visuals for every day, for the days leading up to the Kickstarter, for the first days of the Kickstarter, like maybe the first, it depends on how long your Kickstarter is, for the first few days of the Kickstarter. And then you're gonna need to like also keep plugging in and touching base with people beforehand to say, hey, like Kickstarter is still going on. You know, for maybe those people who didn't get a chance to invest. So plan out all those visuals. You need to advertise if possible on social media, through news outlets. I don't know, maybe going to your local newspaper to say, hey, I'm launching a Kickstarter. This is why this is newsworthy. Reaching out to magazines, to blogs, to any press outlets you can get to try to yeah, just gain as much exposure. If possible, collect emails beforehand so that the day the Kickstarter launches, you can just send out that blast and say, hey, we're now live. You know, to just try to send out any promotion to promote what's going on. And yeah, like as I said, thankfully my Kickstarter was fully funded, full $7,000. But anything that could have gone wrong after that point went wrong. So let me begin with the rewards. I think for the rewards, I offered several tiers. There's a $5 option, a $10 option, maybe a $50 option, $100 and $200 option. And so for each of these things, like I think the $5 option was like a keychain or like a thank you note, and a headscarf. The $10 option was a keychain, and then like of course the shoe option. So for everything, I just made samples, and they're working samples, but the samples still had issues. Like for the design of aspergills that I chose, they're like a platform wedge where I just like literally like cemented and stacked EVA. However, because of that, they were like they were inflexible, so basically it was impossible to walk in them. But I was just like, it's fine, I'll just figure it out after the Kickstarter launches. So number one, always, 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 always have a perfected or working prototype before you launch the Kickstarter. So whether that's you making the prototype and saying, hey, this is ready to go to market, or you going to the factory and getting a finalized sample from a factory, finalized sample from a factory, because both of these things take time. To get a finalized sample, that could take anywhere from 4 to 8 weeks. Or if you figuring out yourself, it may take the same amount of time. So always have a finalized sample. 2, if you're going to a factory, make sure to establish that beforehand. So my initial plan was to go to factory. And I wasn't stressed about that because the fact that I was working in footwear at the time, my boss at the time, he was like, oh, if you ever want to do a factory, like, let me know. I have like the perfect factory for you. And like, of course, before the Kickstarter, I'm like, hey, I'm launching this. Like, I would really need like that factory. He says, oh, yeah, no problem. Like, I'll get it to you. And so in my mind, I was set. I was just like, okay, like, that's why I was so confident with the samples. I was like, I have these and these don't work. But I know that this person told me that they got me in terms of the factory. So of course, when the Kickstarter wrapped, I went back to him and said, hey, like to my old boss, said, hey, remember that factory that you promised about me in contact with? He says, oh yeah. He responded to me like 2-3 days later after I hit him back up. He says, oh yeah, I spoke to them and they're not willing to work with beginners, sorry. And so I'm like, okay, crap, well, like, what do I do now, you know? And so I said, I know. I will go on Alibaba and I will source all of these different components and I'll make the shoe myself. Horrible idea. So yeah, I ended up ordering espadrille soles. I think the espadrilles that for the rewards ended up only like totaling to 40 or 50. But because of the fact that I was going to a manufacturer, I had to order minimum of 200. So I ordered minimum 200 espadrille soles. I ordered separate sheets of EVA, my own contact cement. We were using fabric by a Bahamian manufacturer, so I had to go and get yardage of fabric from them. Buy lining fabric, all the stitching and trims. And then I also offered beaded options. So all of the beading and Swarovski crystals separately, and all of the trims and notions needed to go along with that. So yeah, wild ride. Needless to say, I'm very good at designing shoes, and I know how to make shoes, but it's not my forte. Craftsmanship is my forte. Also, that I didn't mention that was the time where I went back to where I had gone back to grad school. So I had to deal with making, it's probably about like 50 or more pairs of shoes, in addition to all these bandanas and all these keychains and every single tier of reward available, which I did not account for. So the next thing is account for the unaccountable. Like, if you plan on making these things, realistically, plan out who's gonna make them. As I said, I thought I had a factory, but that didn't work out. So you should always have a backup plan. I ended up having to make it myself. And because of that, I didn't plan for that cost-wise. And then thinking about it also, $7,000 was just an abstract quote. I didn't even know if that's how much money it would be from an actual factory. So that's the next thing, like, have exact cost estimates of how much everything is going to cost. That is the cost of making the rewards. That is the cost of advertisements, whether that's running social media ads during your Kickstarter or paying to have a press release, whether it's in a newspaper, a blog, on TV, whatever it is, or like even like advertising on a website, like using like AdSense or whatever. Figure out an exact total or as close as possible to what all that is going to be, and then account for 15 to 20% more. I think that if I'd actually locked down my factory and gotten that exact quote and gotten confirmation from the factory that they'll be able to assist me, that would have been one thing. In addition to that, if I had actually done the backup planning, I would have known that that would have been another thing. And then if I had accounted for the time that would have taken me, or hiring, or how much it would cost to hire an assistant, that would have been a third thing. So again, just having all these things in place. I'm just reading my notes. Oh, I didn't account for the Kickstarter fee. It was 5%. However much 5% is of 7,000, I didn't account for that because of the fact that I actually went over, y'all, like, I actually ended up going over the 7,000, not only because I didn't account for the seven, not because I didn't account for the 5% Kickstarter fee. I also didn't account for declined credit cards. There's, I would say, about 10 to 15% of the people that pledged, the credit cards were declined. I don't know why. I don't know if it's because of the fact that, money was on it, or um yeah, like, it was an international card, but Kickstarter did not accept it. So that was the reason I was under, and of course the reason I was over is because I didn't budget correctly. um and I think my worst mistake, or my worst regret, was lack of communication with the people that pledged from the Kickstarter. I am a naturally anxious person, and one of the things that gives me anxiety is communication, because of the fact that I need control. Like, for example, like, I plan everything out in my day, and I'm realizing now the source of a lot of anxiety is actually not having control of the outcome, whether that's the outcome of the situation from your actions, or the outcome in terms of not knowing what people's reaction are going to be. I think that I was already anxious from not knowing, from saying, okay, these rewards are already late. Oh, and let me just say, I ended up delivering the rewards like a year later than what they're actually supposed to be. They weren't the quality they're supposed to be. They weren't the exact, like, everything about it was wrong. Like, but I just ended up, most people ended up getting something in the mail about a year later. But I think, as I said, my worst mistake is not communicating what was going on, why it was taking so long, um, and what the process was actually looking like. Because of that, I had a bunch of irate customers, people that was like, "Where's my stuff?" And like, I think there's times where it's just like, okay, like, actually, after like the first thing with the factory fell through, that was already a month. After I ordered the materials separately, that was already another month to 2 months in terms of me actually receiving them. Because, like, for example, the Swarovski crystals came from New York, the Espadrille souls came from Spain, the lining materials came from Joanne's, um some of the beading came from China. So just like getting all that stuff took like another 2 months, and then me just trying to figure out the design myself and pattern making, so that took another month. And yeah, like, just the making of the shoes themselves, that took the rest of the year, because, as I said, I was working at the time, I was in school full time, and that's not an excuse. But I think, out of all things, there's never an excuse for lack of communication, because that's something that takes the least amount of time. Check in with your Kickstarter pledges or pledgers like once a week at the very least, to say, and if the timeline has changed, give a breakdown of the timeline, update your Kickstarter page to say, hey, this was the timeline before, and this is the current timeline now. And just, thank you so much for being patient. Just know that we're going to update you as things change. Communication, yeah, there's never an excuse for lack of communication, because that's the easiest thing to do, but unfortunately it's the thing that gives me the most anxiety, especially because of the fact that when I know sometimes the situations aren't favorable, you never know how a customer is going to react. Like, like, I kind of feel like for every 9 customers, there's always going to be like 3 crappy ones. Like, it's always going to be, you're always going to have difficult customers. You're always going to have Karens that are going to demand to see the manager. And like, sometimes, yes, like, customers are justified in their irateness and in their anger, and sometimes they're not. And sometimes you're just gonna, I need to learn how to account for my own accountability, but be also able to know how to still be emotionally present and say, okay, I'm not accountable for others' reactions. I'm only accountable for what I communicate, and I'm accountable for myself, but I'm not accountable for the way that people react. And that's just a lesson about customer service that I didn't know before my Kickstarter. So yeah, I would just advise anybody, like, if you're starting a Kickstarter, know all these things. Also, have a website before you launch your Kickstarter, so that when Kickstarter ends, you can instantly reroute people to your website to say, hey, the Kickstarter has ended, but here's where you can now pay full price for the products. That's not something that I had either, and I think that resulted in a lot of lost sales, because of the fact that I had so much marketing during the Kickstarter that could have just literally just easily flowed into my website. So hopefully all these things are helpful to you guys. However you plan on funding your business, whether that's saving, whether that's getting a loan, whether that's angel investing, crowdfunding, I just hope that all of these things are things that you do due diligence with. And yeah, hopefully this was helpful. And I will see you guys next week. Bye.